In this weekly Wrangle, I want to talk about understanding the business mindsets. And I want to compare people who are good at business with people who are bad at business. Because in my opinion, there are far too many people in the world of animation, VFX, and video games who are terrible at business. And that has everything to do with their lack of awareness of things that they should be thinking about and a lack of values when it comes to approaching difficult situations. I think it's really helpful to draw out extreme comparisons so that we can understand what somebody who's bad at business looks like versus somebody who's good at business. To get us started in understanding this, I'd like to introduce you to Bad Business Billy. Bad Business Billy is not good. He's poor, he works hard, he's just getting owned by life. Versus Badass Billy, who's doing quite well. Now, what are the differences between these two when it comes to business? We're going to use Bad Business Billy to explain how people go wrong in business. So, to start off, Bad Business Billy doesn't really value his time. He's never really thought about the fact that his time is a product which he can offer his clients. And so if he goes to, let's say, bid a project, or he's trying to figure out whether or not he should go salary for a company that is going to overwork him or whatever it is, he's not really thinking about his time because he doesn't value his time and he doesn't recognize it as a commodity that's worth something. So kind of tied into that, Bad Business Billy has a lack of self-confidence attached to that. Now, Bad Business Billy also doesn't like conflict and or thinking about unpleasant things. As a matter of fact, if you try to bring up some of his problems, if he tries to, in his mind, do some self-reflection about the things that he doesn't like about himself, he is not about that. He doesn't like it. It's too much. And instead of thinking about conflict or unpleasant things ahead of time, he just lets it happen. He lets the chips fall where they may and tries to be a nice guy and hopes that it just kind of, falls in place as it should. Also, Bad Business Billy uses his problems to justify the lack of preparedness for the future. Things are just really tough. Things are bad. The economy's really not doing too good. The world sucks. The employer isn't really, giving him what he wants. And that's just how it is. And so it's going to justify any lack of preparation because what's the point? What's the point of preparing for the future when things are just stacked against you? That's the mindset of Bad Business Billy. In a weird way, Bad Business Billy also allows others to define his values, and he's not even aware of it. I think that Bad Business Billy probably loves to get worked up about politics and loves to base his entire value structure over what feels good. And so there's really not a lot of critical thought going on. There's not this humility and willingness to be wrong to improve his value system because it's not really his value system. It's somebody else's. He belongs to a clique and he's cool with letting that clique or that group define his values instead of doing the hard work himself. Also, Bad Business Billy would probably much rather escape into the computer than actually deal with his problems. And this hits true especially for people who work with computers. I think that many times people like Bad Business Billy grew up kind of socially awkward. Maybe he wasn't good at sports. Maybe he didn't look very good. He wasn't able to attract any girlfriends throughout his childhood. And that just became this big insecurity. And so it's much more comfortable to escape the world into the computer because that is more familiar, that is easier to control than the real world. And rather than deal with his insecurities and problems, he instead just sticks to what's comfortable. And finally, Bad Business Billy is way more comfortable blaming other people or the world at large for his lack of success than taking responsibility for mistakes. Mistakes are just too much to deal with. Life is already overwhelming. Why try to deal with them and add more baggage to what you already have going on? And so Bad Business Billy would much rather feel more comfortable in this fake sense of power by blaming other people and getting upset at the world for his discontentments. When really what he needs to do is more introspection and have more bravery to deal with the things that he doesn't want to deal with. So things are not looking good for Bad Business Billy. He is not a pleasant person, if we're being quite honest. However, Badass Billy, by comparison, has this going on. He understands that what he sells to the client is his time. He recognizes that his time is a commodity, just as the product that he produces is a commodity. He has self-respect. He tries to enable a schedule that has some kind of work-life balance and actually stands by that. Badass Billy is a proactive goat because he would rather be proactive in thinking about unpleasant things and conflict before they happen. So he's all about being proactive, thinking ahead of time, diving into unpleasant things, unpleasant thoughts, if that means he can somehow improve the future ahead of time. So he's proactive. And as a result, more positive because he's willing to bet that he can do something about all that. Badass Billy also uses his life problems as opportunities for growth. And so rather than seeing his failures, his problems, the things that didn't go well as an excuse for giving up, he uses that as motivation for trying to refine himself, become a better goat into the future, and use that to his advantage. Also, Badass Billy thinks for himself and allows others to contribute, but not completely define his values. And that's a very, very important distinction. Yes, he does engage in his own critical thinking and analysis and comes to his own opinions. But in addition to that, he also allows other people to contribute. He's humble enough to recognize that he could be wrong. And so he actually listens to what other people have to say, and he doesn't listen to it with an expectation of immediately shooting down whatever comes his way. He actually cares about what others have to say because he's going to use that in his own critical, detached thinking to improve his values over time. That's what makes somebody a Badass Billy. Also, Badass Billy doesn't care about escapism. Why escape when you are completely competent at dealing with the world, right? He uses his computer as a tool rather than a drug. And I know many of you watching are thinking, well, how is a computer a drug? Where did that come from? Well, what does a drug do? It helps you escape reality. And guess what computers do? It helps you escape reality. Badass Billy recognizes this. And he recognizes that the computer is a great tool, but if you use it as a drug, it works against you. It causes you to become more like Bad Business Billy and not engage in the real world. And just so you know, if you try to be Bad Business Billy, the real world's going to catch up with you eventually. Somehow, some way, you can escape for a while, but you are part of the real world. And Badass Billy recognizes that and would much rather engage with the real world than escape into a fake one. Also, Badass Billy recognizes the problems caused by other people, but doesn't allow that to become more important than moving himself forward into a positive direction. So yes, Badass Billy is not just this fake sense of happiness and optimism. We can't really fake that. If we recognize that somebody is screwing us over, or we recognize that the world is acting against us, we can't lie to ourselves about that. But we do have a choice in choosing what is more important for ourselves. Badass Billy recognizes that it's more important to move forward than it is to dwell on things that are going poorly. Things are going to deteriorate, go badly, go against you. That's a given. How you react to that is what's more important. And Badass Billy gets that. Badass Billy would rather give his best shot at finding success and failing than being salty with no chance of success like Bad Business Billy. There's a lot more that can be said with those character traits and that comparison between the two goats. But if you want to be somebody who is successful at business, you need to be a badass Billy rather than bad business Billy. Now, you guys might have a difficult time trying to see how that practically actually relates to the real world because yeah, that stuff sounded right. It sounded kind of good, but how does that actually boil down into real world things? Well, it looks like this. It means that there's not really a good market for asset artists to sell their products directly because people underprice themselves far too much across the board. They might spend 5 days working on some sort of model that's really high quality and then only turn around to sell it for $10. And what caused that person to not think about selling it for more money? Everything that I just mentioned with what was going on with Bad Business Billy. You see, the accumulation of our values boils down into real practical results. And when somebody doesn't value their time or isn't even thinking about their time, or they lack self-respect, or they don't think it's good, or they don't realize what they're actually giving to other people, that's when they charge $10 for a week's worth of work. And it's not a big deal if 1 or 2 people do that, but if it happens over and over and over again, then it collapses a business that used to be a viable business, but no longer is a viable business. And that's not just people who are trying to sell assets online or freelance or make video tutorials. It's not just those people. For those of you who are employed, how many of you have asked for a raise in this past year? I don't think enough people have. And guess what's going to happen next year because you didn't ask for a raise this year? It means that you are doing the same work, but you are poorer. You have less money to spend on goods and services because you just got beat out by inflation. The costs of goods and services around you have gone up and your income has stayed the same, making you significantly poorer, and to a tune of about 15 to 20% poorer in 1 year. Now, over time, that's going to compound, right? So if that happens again in this next year and you don't ask for a raise and you're still staying at your same salary, then you are offering cheaper and cheaper and cheaper work to your employer over time. And this is a battle not just for employees, but for your employers as well, because they need to figure out how to charge their customers more money just to break even with inflation. I had a whole wrangle that was just on this exact topic. If you want to know why animation, VFX, real-time stuff can be a difficult business, it's not because the product we're offering isn't cool enough. The problem is because people suck at business. They don't have self-respect and they don't stand by their values. It's one thing to tell yourself what you believe, but what you actually believe is what you do and what you say. And so if it's a bad deal, don't do it. When people take bad deals, it makes it worse for everyone else. And it's bad for you too. And if you are in a bad situation, then have the courage to move on to something else, because it's more important to deal with the real world ahead of time and on your own terms than be passive and try to be more comfortable as you justify it by everything else being difficult around you. It's just not the route to go. It's not better for you. It's not better for anyone else. So I hope you guys see how your values impact your business. Understanding the business mindset is understanding the values that you stand by while having the courage to actually live by them. Thanks for joining me on this weekly wrangle. I hope that you found this interesting and useful. If you're interested in mentorships, one-on-one mentorships with me, or career advice or consultations, I now have a new service called CG Forge Academy, which you can find by visiting the link below. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.